Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Chad Anderson back with us, SpaceX investor and managing partner of Space Capital, to discuss the third quarter 2023 private market equity investment activity and startup trends in the space economy, as it is starting to show signs of recovery in the capital markets. It's great to have you with us as always. And as I was going through the report here, Chad, it felt as if there was a little bit more of a positive tone than in quarters past that we've covered. Are you starting to see some slowing signs of recovery here?
Definitely. I mean, it's been a tough couple of years, and in the broader venture markets, things are still tough. We saw a wave of down rounds that we hadn't seen since 2017, which is, bad, but also good because that means that deals are at least happening. So the market is sort of starting to find some equilibrium. So in contrast, there's several indications that things are improving in the space capital markets. There was another $3 billion invested in Q3. So there's now been $284 billion invested into 1,800 unique space companies over the last 10 years. There were 103 rounds closed in the quarter, which was the highest in the last 5 quarters. So things are picking up a little bit faster than the broader venture markets. And we're seeing a lot of companies graduate. So in the market mania of 2021, we saw a lot of early stage deals getting done. And they were sort of like indiscriminately going on and raising larger sums of capital. Now investors are more discerning. So things are slowing down, but we're also seeing a real dearth of Series A and later stage investments happening. So broader venture markets are seeing 10% of deals are Series A. We're seeing a quarter of all deals Series A in space. So, for us, that means that companies that are able to hit their milestones are able to secure funding at a higher rate than in venture generally.
Chad, would you say that we're out of the woods? Have we passed that inflection point in the space economy yet when it comes to capital?
I mean, not out of the woods yet, right? Like things are picking up a little bit faster than the markets more broadly, which is a really positive sign. But there's, still challenges. One bit of data, insight that came out of the data for us that was really interesting was that infrastructure investment has already passed the full year 2022 investment. So infrastructure meaning like the rockets and the satellite hardware in some of these emerging areas like space stations and lunar transportation, right? Like the hard CapEx heavy stuff, which in a market like this, you'd normally think that investors would there'd be a flight to quality, which there is, but that they'd be going to companies that are less capital intensive, more software based companies that didn't have such high capital requirements. But we're actually seeing the opposite thing happen. And in space, 3/4 of all the investment funding this year has gone to infrastructure companies. Meanwhile, the sort of software applications that are leveraging the data off of those assets has really sort of fallen off a cliff, which is really interesting because we're seeing more companies chasing government dollars in this market environment, and there's a whole lot of government dollars that are continuing to be spent in these types of companies, even through this market downturn.
What are some of the recent trends that you're taking notice of? I'm sure AI plays into this somehow.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, AI has captured the imagination. That is, all companies put an AI at the end of their name, and they're able to successfully fundraise even in this market, right? There's a lot of attention, a lot of interest in the potential of AI. AI use cases in the space economy are really nothing new. We have seen companies, particularly in geospatial intelligence, right? Companies that are leveraging data off of space-based assets, the mapping information that we get, the location information that we get. A lot of that data it has been used for decades, and there's so much of it that it's impossible for humans to sort of parse through and annotate and make sense of. And so AI has been applied to these data sets for a very long time, and we're now sort of seeing that come to the forefront. But AI is increasingly being used for satellite operations, managing satellite communications networks, and it's horizontal that really touches everything across the space economy.
I want to talk about the changing world order that was called out in the report. I don't recall that being in there or taking as much notice or as much prominence as it had in the report. What are some of the things that you're seeing there in terms of where the power shifts are taking place?
Well, I mean, we're really looking at the investment trends over the last 10 years, right? We've been operating in space for decades, but it's only recently become a category for investment, really on the heels of SpaceX. And so we've seen, all that $280 billion that I was talking about that's been invested over the last 10 years has really gone from zero previously. SpaceX opened this up as a category for investment. So we're seeing a lot of the investment go to the US and China, actually. So 50% of all investment across the space economy has gone to US companies. A quarter of that is China, and the rest of it is really the last quarter is the rest of the world. Because we're looking at this over the last 10 years, there's not usually a lot of movement here. But OneWeb was a key driver in the UK's investment. It was a satellite communications company that went through bankruptcy and was purchased by the UK government, as well as Bharti in India. And that company has now been acquired by a French company. So we did see some movement there in terms of the top 5 countries and activity there. Notably, India is on that list of the top 5. They had a huge milestone soft landing on the surface of the moon in Q3, while Russia, of course, crashed into the surface. So a lot of really interesting activity outside of just the US and China in Q3.
All right, Chad, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.